Welcome back to the CPA Revolution. I'm Charina Padilla here with our tax strategy expert and co-host, certified tax coach and CPA, Jose Ortiz. If you are tired of traditional reactive CPA advice and want to turn taxes into a wealth building tool, you are in the right place. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining another session of the CPA Revolution. Today, we're taking another deep dive into cost segregation.
Yeah, and I think, Charina, you're probably knee deep in cost segregations at this point, especially with the 100% bonus being instituted.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and workload, it's not absent in our daily lives. So
Yeah.
we're doing everything that we can to get reports completed and make sure that the CPAs are looking like heroes at the end of the day for their clients.
Well, I'll tell you what, you guys do a great job, especially Charina. Thanks for all your help and support with my clients. You guys do a wonderful job. So ETS, Engineer Tax Services, is the way to go. What do we have to talk about today?
Well, we're talking about the depreciation game, and we have three exciting scenarios of clients that we have helped in the past and how their positions may be different using the same strategy, right? So it's so important to understand what you are trying to accomplish, where you are, and where you're going. So we're going to break those down today, and hopefully you guys will learn something new and identify which of these client profiles are more aligned with your specific situation.
All right, let's get into it.
If you spend any time around real estate investors, you've probably heard the question, have you done a cost segregation study? And it's almost always framed like a no-brainer, right? But today's conversation isn't about whether cost segregation works. It's about when it works and what it amplifies, right? So why is cost segregation usually treated like a tactic instead of a structural decision, Jose?
It's pretty much because people don't understand. We live in a society where obviously we're on social media all the time, and people who have legitimate tax issues, big tax bills or whatnot, they see these little shiny objects. And this is one of those. This is one of those tactics that I call, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But it's a tactic, right, that can help legitimately save you money on taxes. However, there has to be some things in place. We can't put the cart before the horse.
Right. So what's missing from most of those conversations?
Well, I'll tell you what's missing with most of those conversations is, when they come in, people do not understand that what we need to do before we do anything is to outline what the goals and the objectives are, right? So, what is the vision, I guess, first? Once we have that vision for the investor, then we can kind of talk about, okay, well, what are the strategic objectives that we have for you that you can identify? So how are we going to get to that vision using these strategic objectives? And only then do we talk about tactics. And
Right.
tactics are short term, right? And they're designed to accomplish a certain objective. So that's kind of the difference. And that's where people just don't understand that now. And, obviously that's because there's probably a lack of understanding in general in this country about how taxes work.
Yeah. I always wonder, like, why can the same tax strategy feel safe for one investor and risky for another?
Yeah, and it goes back to what are they doing this for, right? And we
Mhm.
have three examples here that we kind of can talk to you about where you can see the people who have gone in here and put a lot of thought into this and a lot of planning into this versus the person who, hey, I have a big tax bill. I need to do something immediately. What can I do?
We always talk about systems, and I know, like, with the examples that we're going to go over today, we have Grant, right? For example, Grant's case, that's a stable system. He didn't use cost segregation to fix a problem. His system was already steady, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think that steady income change and how depreciation works in Grant's case?
Right. So you got to understand with Grant, and by the way, this is in the article for you guys following along. Grant didn't approach cost segregation when he came to you, Charina. Let's just suppose he did, right? He already came to you not wanting to necessarily fix a tax problem, right? Because the picture for him was already clear, right?
Mm.
So he was probably working with a CPA who outlined all of the financial scenarios, all of the entities, the structures, the income, all of those different things, and set forth a plan for him. So when he came to you for that cost segregation, right, he already knew, right, what was going to pretty much happen. He already had the intention in place. So he's not looking for tax savings. It's part of the plan. And then what
Right.
he's looking to do is those tax savings, what he's going to do, he's going to redeploy them into the next project, right? So he already had a plan going in. So for you guys, that makes it super simple, right? For tax planners, it makes it super simple. That's the big difference with Grant in his case.
Yeah, so the tax savings didn't really like tighten his position, right? It just strengthened it.
Yeah, I mean, it strengthened it in the sense that it's being used as a lever to achieve his objectives, right? Because what does he want? He just wants to be able to reduce taxes on income that's already existing, that's already consistent, that's already forecasted, right? So he's not coming to you, oh my God, I need to find something right now, Charina. You need to help me. What can I do? Is this cost a option?
Yeah, yeah, he's definitely was proactive. So from your point of view, what does the conservative underwriting have to do with this tax stability play?
Well, conservative underwriting obviously is you're speaking for the cost seg, I imagine, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So that plays all in there, right? So basically what he does is go to you guys, right? And you guys obviously do a good job at estimating what the potential tax savings is for, and you do it on a conservative basis. So with using those numbers, at least he has a basis on which to kind of do his numbers and do those projections. And, chances are, since you guys do a good job of being conservative, it's always a little bit more, right?
Right, right,
So that he fits his plan even better, right? Because now
right,
he
right.
knows exactly what the minimum would be, right? But then he might have more potential to that.
For sure, for sure. So I think the takeaway here with his stable system is that cost segregation wasn't a rescue move for him. It was an
That's right.
efficiency move. So
Exactly.
let's walk through the other examples that we've had that we have experience with other clients, similar positions but handled differently. We
Yeah.
have Jared's case that we talked about earlier. Jared wasn't really chasing deductions. He was trying to control the timing, right? That's kind of like
Yeah.
how I see that one.
Yeah.
Why does long holding period change the depreciation conversation?
Well, because part of his vision is to buy and hold long term, right?
Mhm.
What that does for him is it allows him to see the entire depreciation through, right?
Mhm.
So there's no depreciation recapture per se, right? He's just buying and holding these things. He's taking advantage of the tax savings, right? And basically, when he needs capital, right, and he wants to buy into another property, what is he doing? Well, he's refinancing. Why
Right,
can he refinance just like that? Because again, he has systems in place. He understands what the process is, right? He understands what those steps in the process are, and then he follows it to a T, right? So basically he has his, if you can imagine a table, he's basically put everything out on the table. He understands how each of those components work together. He understands cost seg and how that works. He understands the effects of depreciation recapture. So he's taking all of those kind of things and he's making a decision, right, as to how to approach this.
right.
Well, here's my vision. Here's my options. How do I make all of these options meet that vision? And
Yeah.
that's exactly what he's doing.
And I have many clients just like him that ask, well, should I refinance or sell? Like, what's gonna be best? Well, it just depends on the individual and what your goals are, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that's what I try to get to people because, they'll come to me as well. It's like, well, what should I do? Well, I'm not you, right? And I'm not in your shoes. So talk to me about what you want to do. Do you want to leave a legacy for your children, their grandchildren? Do you want to just be able to cash all of this out and enjoy your retirement for, however long that is? What do you
Mhm.
want to do, right? Do you
Right.
want to build a huge portfolio? It all depends, right? Because everybody's motives are different depending on their life situation.
I agree. I agree. Jose, from your point of view as a CPA, how does depreciation behave differently when you plan your exit that's 10 years or more out?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at that point, right, that's what I meant earlier when I said see the depreciation through, right? So basically, by buying and holding, I'm not worried about that 25% depreciation recapture. I don't have to factor that in. Now, in Grant's case, it might be a little bit different, right? So he
Right.
might be looking to, buy, do the depreciation, right? Hold it 5 years. Maybe he has some different investors coming in and, earning a return and then coming out of that. So for him, it's crucial that he work with a CPA that understands depreciation recapture because then they'll be able to model those scenarios, right? And he can at least have a understanding of what the bottom will be and maybe what the high would be on those investments.
Right, right. Or bring in other strategies that we can stack onto each other to make sure that it,
Exactly.
it is a
Good point.
solid play for him.
Good point. That's the other
Love
thing
it.
is like,
Yeah,
if we're projecting out, then I know you're going to have that depreciation recapture coming in. So what do we do? The year of that recapture, we strategize around that. What are the options? What can we do to avoid that? Maybe a 1031. Maybe he says, I don't want to cash it out. I want to get a a bigger multifamily, 20, $25, whatever it may be. And then it's a little bit more simple because as you know, the depreciation recapture is not considered when we're doing that 1031, right? It's
yeah.
just kicking the can down the road.
I love that. Yeah. So just to summarize Jared's situation, the way I see it is like depreciation for him was aligned with optionality, right? He had options and he
Yep. Best thing you ever have,
yeah.
options.
So let's move on to our third case. We talked about Ryan, right? The
Yeah.
income spike investor. His situation is where most listeners probably see themselves, right? They have a big income spike, big tax pressure, new property, cost segregation is going to create that six-figure loss. On paper, it works, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But then
yeah,
the reality shows up. Where
exactly.
did the systems break down for Ryan?
Ryan just didn't, he went in blind, right? So he probably went on TikTok or one of these other things, heard this wonderful opportunity to, save money on his taxes, got into real estate maybe without even understanding the full picture, right? And definitely didn't understand the long-term implications of not only holding real estate, but then doing this cost segregation and how that would impact him. Not understanding the cash flows, which is crucial, right? Not understanding the cash flows in year one, year two, and so forth, not projecting those. And as you said, a lot of people get into this stuff, without understanding because I wouldn't say, well, I guess they are. They're desperate for something to be able to help them, right? But that's always what I'm kind of talking about. Is like we cannot use tactics ahead of strategic objectives, ahead of that vision, right? Because this is what happens. It's short-sighted, right? And in this case, he purchased a 12-unit apartment building, right? Thought it was the best thing ever, but then since he didn't understand the long-term consequences, I think he wound up selling in year two or year three. Right. And of course, here comes depreciation recapture and all these different things that he never considered. So it turned out to be a loser in their case, right?
Mhm.
Had he had somebody consulting him, a good CPA who understands and is proactive and can help him project outwards what a situation like that would look like, then he probably would have put some extra thought in that in the beginning, right? And then maybe considered other options that might work better for him.
Do you think that cost segregation was a problem, or was there like an income?
Cost segregation is never the problem. It's again going in there without a battle plan. Who goes into a war without a battle plan? So that's really what it is. And then, it's the short-sightedness, unfortunately, that kind of gets all of us, right? Because we see what's happening today without necessarily thinking about tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's definitely the core risk, right? Like the timing versus the pattern, right? It feels like the real issue for Ryan is that he reacted to a spike and not an actual pattern, right? How
Yeah.
often do you see investors make decisions based on unusual
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
unusual strong year?
Yeah, it's happened to me quite a few times where I'll meet with people. I remember a couple in Pennsylvania, I believe it was. By the time I talked to them, they had already gone knee deep into stuff, right?
Mhm.
And it was so bad, unfortunately for them, because they didn't understand the rules between, active and passive income and passive losses and how those interact and all that stuff. So they were kind of like, Jose, why am I not seeing these losses impact my tax picture, right? As a matter of fact, I was on the call this week. Same kind of scenarios like, okay, we've done all this stuff, right? Where's the impact, right? What's going on? Because they just don't understand it enough. They didn't understand enough going in. So literally, I had to kind of walk them through, and then the light bulb went off, right? Oh, I see what we're doing wrong. What can we do at this point? So it's
Yeah,
clean.
right.
Yeah.
So what happens when the income normalizes? And I've seen this a lot with like investors that are working on fix and flips, right? They have
Yeah.
big years and then there's one year that they barely do anything. What are you
Yeah.
doing on your side?
It's all about predictability. How predictable is the income? And if I'm looking at somebody, let's just say I have two cases. I have someone who's making predictable income, right, versus somebody that's going to be fluctuating more. I'd be careful to bring cost segregation to the table at that point, right?
Mhm.
Particularly if they have no exposure to real estate, particularly if they have no knowledge of how this game works in tax, right? So with those people who are predictable income, well, you can imagine it's a lot easier to play this game for me, right? Because I can, I want to say I can count on. It's not for certain, but we can understand what each year will bring, and hence I can kind of understand what their vision is, for what they want to do with their lives, and I can come up with strategic objectives, right, to get to that vision. And then once we have that objective, then we can start talking about those tactics, all those things you see on TikTok, the cost eggs and short-term rentals and all that stuff.
Yeah, and we usually end up at this same conclusion, like
All the time.
depreciation is not just a tax move, it's a timing decision.
Big time. Yeah. And you can imagine, look, in the case of predictability, if I have clients who whose income are so predictable and they know that they're going to get a spike, maybe in these cases where we have individuals who have stock options or restricted stock units or whatever it may be, they know that that's going to come, right? Then we can actually play up to that. We can actually be proactive and say, okay, this is the year we got to do this stuff. But not only this year, let's take a look at what's going to happen afterwards. Because obviously, with depreciation, some of that money might get clawed back. Some of those benefits might be clawed back by the government. And that's the stuff we always got to consider because that's really where cost seg can play the tricks on you. A lot of people don't anticipate depreciation recapture. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not and well, that's just one of them. And then obviously the cash flows that are coming in from the business, the expenditures
Right.
required. And then, of course, the regulatory stuff, right? Oh, I didn't know, my state does this, or, my city has these ordinances, and I had to spend all this money and do all this stuff. And what happens is they're leaking. Yeah, on paper, they have a loss, but in the
Hmm.
bank account, they're just bleeding money. So does that really help at the end of the day?
Yeah, I love that you bring up that cash flow topic into the conversation because I think that's where investors get confused, right? The tax return
Yeah.
showing that loss, but then the operating account shows outgoing checks. Can you
Yeah.
explain like the psychological disconnect between paper losses and real cash?
Right. Paper losses are just like what it sounds, right? So, let's just say you have income of, say, $5,000 coming in, right? And your expenditures are close to that, right? In real life, you're not seeing much of income. So that's not really helping you from the income side, right? Now, on the paper side, it may be, you have a loss. Fantastic. All right. You have a loss, but then you don't know necessarily what to do with that loss, right? You don't know how it applies to your situation. For a lot of W-2 employees, they get shocked when they see I have all these passive losses. And here's the funny thing. I talk to clients or prospects. When I look at their tax returns, they probably had losses rolling over from 5 years. And they have
Mhm.
never noticed and never understood why that happens, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't necessarily understand the mechanics. They don't understand that, tax and book depreciation are different, right? So all of those kind of things factor in, but it's usually a really, really big surprise.
Yeah, I can clearly see how that would create stress when the system isn't stable for sure.
Oh yeah, it's a nightmare for some of these people, especially when they put so much, and I feel bad because they'll put so much money and time and effort into this thing because they really believe, I've had couples, young couples get into this stuff without understanding, and then they're stuck in a pickle. They might have to sell that property just to kind of get out of the whole mess. So it was all for naught, right?
Hmm.
So, in general, and this is kind of like going off topic a little bit, but what I would probably suggest for those people out there who are interested in real estate, and obviously takes due diligence too, but try getting into syndications, try getting into partnerships where they're investing beforehand, right? Because then you kind of understand the mechanics, and it's less of a risk for you, right? And not all the weight is on your shoulders at that point, because
Right.
you start learning and understanding the game. Not only that, but one thing, if anybody wants to be an investor, understand what a trailing 12, a T12 is, right? A trailing 12 months of income and expenses, all of those kind of things, right? Try to understand that. Try to understand what a waterfall is. All of those concepts, because those things will help you when you're ready to step out on your own and you feel confident that you understand and you can analyze a property and project on it, because that's the biggest thing. You can project what that might look like, even if it's three different scenarios, good, middle, and not so good. You have vision, you have foresight into what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I agree with everything that you're saying. It's not about the depreciation percentages. We need to think about the durability and the
Yeah.
liquidity that
Yeah.
we need to continue performing.
Yeah.
And those indications really, do help understand for someone that's not very experienced on the real estate investment game, right? And you can
Yeah.
come in as a passive investor, start seeing the patterns, right, on how everything's performing, and then that's going to give you clarity on what
Yeah.
you would be interested in getting into if you decide to go
Yeah.
active on the real
And
estate investments.
I mean, even with that, it tells you, whether you have a great experience or a bad experience, it's going to tell you whether real estate is for you. It's not for everybody, right? And owning something yourselves may not be for you, but maybe partnering into these things may be for you or vice versa. But it's like anything, right? If you think about kind of taking this on by yourself, not only do you have to analyze a property, to see the profitability and see if it's worth it without knowing, then you buy this house. That's an experience in and of itself, right? This property. But then you walk into that property and you're like, oh my God, I need to learn how to fix something, or I need to
Yeah.
learn who I need to call, who are those best vendors. You see, there's so much.
Yeah.
This is so much.
Project management, repairs and maintenance,
Oh my God.
bookkeeping.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into it. And, you're constantly learning. So if you enjoy learning, maybe that's definitely a good fit for you. But it is an uphill battle. But if you put in the work, you can make really good money.
Yeah, and the thing that my clients get tired of me saying this phrase, but is the juice worth the squeeze? That's what you guys want to analyze before you go into these kind of things.
And before asking whether cost segregation works or not, maybe the better question is, what game am I actually playing?
Right. And does it work for you in that game?
Yeah. Am I building durable cash flow, controlling long-term timing, or just reacting to spikes like we saw in your article that was well written, Jose? And I invite everyone to take a moment and review the article to understand what we discussed here today and learn to identify where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah. And it's about, obviously there's plenty of people out there talking about tax strategy, tactics. There's not enough people talking about what if it goes wrong? What if this doesn't work out? What does that tax strategy look like if it doesn't work out? You want to look at all sides of, both sides of the coin before you get involved in this stuff. So that's why we do that.
We want to make sure that we have reliable data for you to learn before
Yeah.
you actually dip your toes.
It's a reality check, right? We're not about, butterflies and rainbows here, right? We're not all the time. We're talking about, hey, watch your back for these things. Keep an eye out.
At the end of the day, we want everyone to be successful. And that's what we're trying to share with you guys here at the CPA Revolution and understand what are the items to watch for so you could be prepared. You can build the systems that are going to support you long term and be proactive in every
Exactly.
way that you.
Exactly. So one of the things that we want to harp on, right, is vision first, objective second, tactics third. If any other CPA is telling you something different and telling you tactics go first, right, I would take a second look.
For sure. Well said, Jose. Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Yep.
And see you at the next session.
All right.